the Mendip Hills in Somerset. This is Cheddar Gorge, a deep ravine carved in the limestone by a prehistoric river. That river still runs, but now hidden deep underground, where it has formed a fantastic labyrinth of caves, which once gave shelter to Stone Age man. Local legend tells of a great cave under Mendip, known to earlier generations, but now lost, its entrance buried and forgotten. There are stories of distant thunder from deep within the hills. Some believe this to be the sound of huge rockfalls in some gigantic chamber. Others prefer supernatural theories. The atmosphere of mystery which surrounds this place helps to draw thousands of visitors to the gorge in summer. The milling crowds compete for space with the traffic in the narrow street. They come to gaze at the towering cliffs, to buy a souvenir or two, and to sample the cheese. But they also come to experience a little of the mystery. Here at Goff's Cave, they can leave the familiar world outside and enter a subterranean world of darkness and strangely beautiful rock formations.
You're now in the diamond chamber, perhaps the most spectacular part of Goff's Cave, and you're also some 400 feet below the Mendip Hills and a quarter of a mile from your start.
The river that once carved out these caves now runs deeper down, beneath the feet of the visitors, creating more caves yet to be discovered.
Cheddar's a funny sort of place. I mean, they've recently discovered bones that predate the Ice Age in there. You know, they go back tens of thousands of years. You know, so early man has been there in Cheddar Caves as long as he has been in Britain anywhere. And there's still this thing that, you know, in the places that early man came to, the first places that people lived in Britain, are still some of the most unknown places. You know, you have thousands, tens of thousands of tourists going around there every year, and yards from their feet, yards from the places that cavemen walked and lived and ate and slept, are places that man's never been in, you know, the last unexplored Britain.
It's amazing that, you know, 25 miles of Bristol, we're actually walking around in chambers, huge chambers that only 3 people to date have ever been in. And there's something like 2 million people every year go past the caves at Cheddar. And maybe, what, a couple 100,000 of those go inside. And you know, they would never imagine that under their feet were these large passages and chambers that, you know, we can actually discover. I think it's a tremendous sort of concept, really.
So you go out on a winter's morning and you go up to your local playing fields and you're the first person up in the morning and it's snowed. And what does everybody do? They run out in the middle of it. You want to see your footprints out in the middle of it because it's fun. Now if you can imagine that taken and magnified to the nth degree, then that's really what it's like. You're suddenly thinking this is a bit of the planet, and I mean for our purposes it's an overpopulated planet in Western Europe. And you're actually going where nobody's ever been before. Any footprints are the first footprints. They're yours. And it's an enormous high.
With my mates, you know, they go down this miserable hole in the ground, and I give them the kit in the right order, feed their kit to them, dress them as though they were babies, which in some instances they really are, and then I sit about in the dry-ish and wait for them to come back. And that is really harrowing in some ways. You're sitting there and they've suddenly gone an hour and they don't reappear for 6 or 7 hours, and you're just sitting there waiting for them to come back thinking, well, are they alive? What's happened? Where are they?
For most people, the very thought of cave diving is the ultimate nightmare. But for the divers, it can be the ultimate dream. To do it takes courage, determination, and a Land Rover full of special equipment.
I started cave diving a long way from the Mendips, up in the Yorkshire Dales about 12, 15 years ago. Then making very, very short penetrations into flooded passages, things we thought were very, very exciting at the time, only perhaps 200 or 300 feet long. And we've come really a long way from things since then, working a lot abroad nowadays. But I think Cheddar Cave here is still one of the most exciting underwater exploration projects on the planet, really, much less in Britain. It's certainly one of the last great adventures of Britain. There is a sort of the sheer thrill of going where no one else has been before, and without a doubt that's an awful lot of it. There's certain technical pleasure in being accomplished with particular skills. I mean, violinists find this playing violins. Racing drivers get it driving racing cars very fast. We get, I think, a certain amount of it out of playing with fairly technically demanding diving equipment, often working with it at the limits of its ability. So it's much more than the simple because it's there syndrome. There's always a sense of wariness about what you're doing, that you're going somewhere and you're doing something that is objectively dangerous. And any activity on the face of the earth is as dangerous as you want to make it, and you make as much effort as you can to reduce those risks. There have been times in Cheddar when I've probably come as close to dying as I ever want to without actually going over the edge. And those are often times when I've done something wrong, rather than the environment has done something wrong. It's just simply a fairly unforgiving sort of place to make errors in. And I think because somewhere is objectively dangerous, you do therefore take more care.
There are days when you don't even get in the water because you suddenly think today is the day that I'm not going to be able to make the rational decision.
Fear really is the thing that keeps you alive. I mean, if somebody didn't have fear, then they're not going to survive. They're going to go on one very incredible journey and not come back, I would think.
There are a lot of sort of primeval fears involved with the idea of going underwater in a cave. There have been times in cave diving when I've turned around simply because I've been too scared to go any further. I've had lots of air, I've had lots of line, the passage has been nice and big, and there's just been something inside me that said, no, time to run away. But one of the thrills is you go back there a couple of days later and you just breeze past that point and you're into unexplored territory again. And you've literally met your own fear limits, and you've coped with them, you've thought about them, you've conquered them, and you're going out and good fun.
That's the major appeal of the sport, is taking something that looks absolutely terrifying and saying, well, look, if you just reduce it to its basics, you're going to survive it.
These divers are about to enter the shaft they call Dire Straits. It leads down to the underground river. For years, cavers had searched for a way into the Cheddar River without success. It was the discovery by Richard Stevenson of this route that opened the way to one of the most important cave explorations of recent years, and the search for the lost cave. The dive isn't easy. It's a narrow, twisting shaft full of projecting rocks ready to snag the bulky diving equipment, which is their life support system and has to work properly.
I hate getting belts twisted, and I hate little particular things going wrong. I now get sort of fairly neurotic about everything being on in the right way. Probably more so than I do about actually servicing the equipment and making sure it's all working.
I tend to put my stuff on in the same order every time. It's almost a little ritual that you get into. It's not just superstition, it's functional as well. It tends to stop you forgetting things. But I do find if I get things in the wrong order somehow, it is very off-putting. You tend not to be as together as you would have been if you got it all in the right order.
Any time we actually go cave diving, you'll find a great reluctance amongst all of us to actually get in the water. We will procrastinate as long as we possibly can. But as soon as you're underwater, and you'll procrastinate right up to the point that your gear is strapped on, you're testing your lights and you're ready to go. And then there's this sense of, oh God, here we go again. Hope to be okay this time. And as soon as you're underwater, things are fine. And you're away, and then suddenly you're switched on, you're alert, and you've gone. And a lot of it is just this anticipation. And it's a sort of nervous reaction to the fact that you are going to have perhaps a great adrenaline buzz, or you are going to be going somewhere. Once you're committed to the journey, it then becomes fun.
They called this a sump. It's hard to believe that diving into a muddy hole could ever be fun, but for Richard Stevenson, the breakthrough to the underground river was an extraordinary moment.
And all of a sudden the temperature went down about 3 degrees. In fact, it's probably nothing like that, but it felt like that. And the visibility cleared, and I was suddenly in this amazing blue river. I just couldn't believe my eyes. I mean, I'd actually got into the main Cheddar River cave. It was just too simple.
Richard had made the link between the dry caves above and the river cave below, which had defeated all previous attempts to find an entrance. The name Dire Straits conveys something of the danger of that narrow, claustrophobic shaft.
It's difficult to convey to somebody who doesn't know about cave diving how incredibly frightening Dire Straits must have been to somebody who was diving it for the first time, not knowing where to go and not knowing they'd be able to come back. You're diving a tight, meandering passage, so you don't even know that you're going to be able to find the same way back that you went in through, in absolutely nil visibility. I'm still incredibly impressed by it.
Now they could begin to explore the river itself.
The thing about cave diving is that usually on the way back the visibility is less than on the way in, and also the passage is complex and lighting is always a problem, so we always lay a line, and the lead diver will have a line reel with maybe 200 or 300 feet of line on it, and as we progress through the cave we lay this line. It's usually the responsibility of the second diver to belay that line onto convenient rocks or spikes on the way in so that it doesn't get dragged into impenetrable narrow parts of the cave. Something we all dread is going through a piece of cave passage through quite wide open passageway, and to find that when you come back the line has been poured into a tight and impenetrable part of the cave passage.
For someone who's never been down in a cave or in a position like this, there's always this feeling that it's a Doctor Who sort of cave where the walls glow and there is some light down there. There is no light at all down there other than the torches that we take with us. And if those fail, or if the water is so thick with silt that you literally cannot see your hand held in front of your face up to your mask, then you're working in a darkness. It's almost so absolute that it's impossible for people to imagine it. You know, it's like being under the bedclothes on a dark night with your eyes shut. And you know, there are times when you literally are working conditions like that, in this whole three-dimensionality with the twisting, turning passage and the silt banks and the small cracks. And you're in a world where touch is just as valid a sense as sight. You know, sight's, you know, something that's handy to have if the conditions allow, but touch can be much more important.
I think one of the biggest problems that we have is route finding. Particularly in Cheddar, it's a very large passage, and cave passage is very complex. It's a bit like finding your way along a road with lots of side turnings in fog, and what we find is that it's very easy to go along a side passage for a considerable distance only to find it's a dead end. And you've then got to reel the line in and get back to where you started. And the visibility by then has got even worse. It's sort of cumulative fog. And we've spent an awful lot of time at Cheddar in particular finding the right way on. And often what looks to be the obvious way on will be a blind alley. And the thing is that having wasted a lot of air going down a blind alley, you've got less air to carry on the exploration, so you have to come back and go back next time.
And you've only got to look at the sort of equipment that we wear to realise that we've thought the whole problem through. There will be 2 air cylinders, and there will be 2 demand valves, there will be 2, 3, maybe even 4 torches, so that if any individual bit of the system fails, you know, any one of your bits of your life support system fail, you've got something else to stick in your mouth or to switch on and run away. And if something like that does happen, you know, you run away very quickly.
Since the invention of the sport, the finding of a major unknown cave has been the dream of every diver, the Holy Grail. Driven on by this goal and armed with lightweight video aid equipment to record events as they happened, the team began a series of longer and longer dives. When they were some 200 yards upstream, an airspace suddenly appeared above them. Surfacing, they found they were in a small, muddy cave with a passage leading from it. They set off to explore.
And we crawled around the corner, literally, and through a little archway and came up and poked our heads up, and we were just in this enormous chamber. We just couldn't believe it, couldn't we?
It was big enough for both of us. I mean, Richard scampered around one wall and I scampered around the other wall, and we shouted across the intervening gap. Literally, we're like a couple of little schoolgirls on an outing for about the next half hour.
With their torches, it was only possible to make out small areas of the new cave, but there was no disputing its size.
Without a doubt, it's one of the biggest underground chambers in the south of England. And to find it after a cave dive where you just got yourself wound up for something disgustingly wet and dirty was quite splendid.
And sort of boulders the size of caravans, sort of gently rocking backwards and forwards as you walked across them. And we got through to the far end of this chamber and climbed down at the other end, and we found some large rifts. And at the bottom of the rifts was the way on.
While Rob and Richard were delighting in their new find, the public were unaware of the drama unfolding below them.
And for also some 400 feet below the Bended Hills and a quarter of a mile from your starting point. Please move up the steps and on the track.
The cave, which they named the Bishop's Palace, was the size of a cathedral. Could it be that they'd actually found the legendary lost cave of Cheddar? Beyond the Bishop's Palace, the river continued, now going deeper down, before rising again to a small airspace, Shepherd's Crook. If a dive was to be mounted on this section, a better entrance to the river than Dire Straits had to be found. Between Dire Straits and the Bishop's Palace, they passed an airspace which they called Lloyd Hall. If they could reach this from the dry caves, the worst part of the dive could be bypassed. With the aid of underground radio location equipment, they began to search for a new route. In places, the roof was less than 12 inches high, and further on, loose rock made conditions treacherous.
Loose rock everywhere. Guess what, fellas? Oh dear.
Twisting and turning, the passage seemed to be taking them to a point somewhere above the Lloyd Hall airspace. At last they reached a small cave where they could stand upright. It ended in a shaft blocked with debris. All the radio plots indicated that Lloyd Hall was now directly below them. They began to clear the shaft.
careful with those rocks.
Yeah, it's just... Oh, how many more of these are there?
You've got some, haven't you? It'd be rather nice if you put them down a bit more carefully, because it's all rather nice if you put them down.
You can keep quiet for a second now. We're going to trundle a couple of boulders down the hole and see if we hear the water. Huh?
Okay, Rob. Oh,
Bloody hell.
I think we're there.
I think we're there.
It's got to be Lloyd Hall.
They were through to Lloyd Hole and the river. Now the downstream section between Lloyd Hole and the original entrance at Dire Straits could be left undisturbed as a conserved area. But first some improvements would be needed to their shortcut. One of the more satisfying parts of cave exploration is known as banging, the setting and detonation of explosive charges to move rock. With a few carefully placed explosions, this new route could be enlarged and stabilized. It's a finely judged process that's more sophisticated than it looks. Too little explosive and you fail to shift the problem. Too much and you risk a roof fall with damage to the delicate environment. Once, early explorers and visitors broke off rock formations that had grown over millions of years to keep as souvenirs. Today, conservation is the watchword, both for the divers and for the company that operates the caves. Future generations have to be considered, and damage of any kind is kept to the absolute minimum.
Batteries?
Might be able to get through it then. I think it went off.
We've engineered a new route down to water level. We're at the moment in the process of building a sort of platform in there which will allow us to kit up at the side of the lake, because there is no actual dry land in Lloyd Hall. It is just a chamber full of lake. And from this platform we can then dive the now relatively short distance through into the Bishop's Palace, carry our equipment over to the further sump, dive through to Shepherd's Crook and continue the exploration on from there. And what we find, from there on, really, at this moment we don't know.
It takes 70 feet of wire rope ladder to reach the water in Lloyd Hole, and this after crawling through muddy passages so low in places that you can't even raise your head. Yet the divers regard this part as the easy route to the Bishop's Palace, simply because it's above water. It's not easy to unwind after a long, exhausting dive, and only another diver can fully understand what you've just been through.
With mountaineering, say, you're working in two dimensions. You're working a flat surface of rock, and although you are working often at your physical limits, you're there within the world around you. You can always abseil off, or you can generally abseil off, or you can fall off. You have a choice. But you've got a good chance, unless you're really at an extreme, of living through it. With caving, and cave diving in particular, you're working in an enclosing three-dimensional environment that really, when you're underwater is an alien world. You can't breathe the atmosphere. The only way in is the only way out is the way you came in. You can't abseil off, as it were. Things go wrong, which could be going wrong anywhere around you. And even beyond the plane that you're swimming across. Then you have to find some way of sorting that out. And it really, really is as alien an environment as you can get without actually getting off the planet.
This three-dimensional thing's really interesting, because if we're sort of sitting here and you're looking for somebody, you just look round like this and they're there. But very seldom do you actually think, I wonder where so-and-so is, and then look up. and when you're in the water, I mean, things can, you find that you can't find the person you're diving with, and simply because they're above you or below you.
Yeah.
You could say it's a four-dimensional thing, because certainly when you're cave diving, there's also a clock ticking away in the back of your head that is called air supply. And you're saying, right, if this problem is going to take X minutes to solve, is it worth trying to solve it, or should I abort, or should I drop kit, or should I cut the line?
Even in open water diving, which you like this to in a way with a sort of 3D bit, you can surface if something goes wrong. You can run away up In cave diving, you can't. You can only run away back down the line. And to all intents and purposes, if we're 1,000 feet into a sump, we're 1,000 feet underwater. You know, we might as well be straight down. You know, pressure differential fine, but you cannot hold your breath that far and swim out. So there, time adds that fourth dimension onto it. Communication's obviously a bit of a problem. You can't easily speak to each other underwater, and in fact, very, very rarely do we need to communicate underwater. We're generally sort of several hundred feet away from each other. If we do, it's by sign language that fits the moment. It's not by necessarily a prearranged sequence of signals, but it's by things that fit the sort of the feeling of the moment. You know, if you've got something wrong with your demand valve, you probably go through a whole little pantomime of things that try to say what the problem was, or if you'd lost something, you point to the fact that your foot didn't have a fin on it anymore. We work in a peculiar sort of team. When we're diving, we're all absolute individuals who'll dive far enough apart generally so that if something goes wrong, it's up to the individual to sort it out without being hassled by anyone else or without placing anyone else's life in danger. But when we're actually in the cave, the fact that the three of us are in there together doing a specific task, where two of us are relying on the third, you know, it may be to get one person diving in the far end of the cave, and the other two people have got to carry equipment through there, and they've got to sort of be in there at a certain time with a certain bit of gear to be part of the jigsaw. So the teamwork is definitely there, but it's a very loosely associated sort of teamwork that is nonetheless very, very reliant on each individual member.
Should something go seriously wrong, they know it'd be easier and probably quicker for the outside world to send help to the North Pole than it would be to reach them. Yet, they're only yards from the safety of the show caves.
Spectacular part of Goss Cave, and for also some 400 feet below the Mendip Hills and a quarter of a mile from your starting point. Please move up the steps and onto the platform and look straight ahead.
The world the divers are discovering is at present beyond the reach of ordinary people, and its protection becomes their responsibility.
It's a very, very delicate environment. Inevitably, when you go through, you're going to destroy it, bit by bit. But the less destruction you do, then the longer it will last for everybody else to enjoy.
You can now see the path that we're wearing, and, you know, in a way, it cheapens the cave, it lessens the cave. And the beauty of finding the next bit on is that that bit is still pristine and untouched and unsullied. And that's much of the excitement of it. The cave could finish around the next corner and it wouldn't surprise us, or it could go on for miles.
Nobody can say, for sure, if the Bishop's Palace is indeed the lost cave. But for the divers, the most important thing is that having found it, their search continues. Now, they're diving deeper than ever before in Cheddar. They're 200 feet below sea level and meeting still more demanding conditions against which to test their equipment and themselves. Like astronauts walking on the moon, they are exploring an environment almost as alien, right here on planet Earth.